Hi everyone, this is Andy here, and I'm doing something a little bit different today. I don't really know what to call this segment. Maybe Andy Unfiltered? I don't know. Because it's very on the knee, off the cuff, and so it might be a little bit rough around the edges. But basically, it's still conference season here, and the LibDem's have just finished their conference today, Tuesday, the 3rd of September, which is the date and time I'm recording this. And Ed Davey has closed conference with his speech. And I just thought I'd use this opportunity to give my own unapologetic and unfiltered opinions regarding the speech. Let's just get a little rundown of the speech itself. So he opened the speech by listing the achievements from individual LibDem MPs in getting legislation passed through with the support of Labour, of course, the achievements that they've done. Some of these achievements he listed, such as domestic violence legislation, a sunset clause on solar panels, and the expansion of breakfast clubs in schools, which he called liberal achievements. So it does go to show that even in opposition, we can be a constructive and good force when it comes to setting legislation and social policies. He then went on to praise the local election victory in this year's local elections, in taking over many councils from the Tories. He then also quoted Frank Sinatra, by all things. So, yeah, Ed Davey is a little bit of a music lover. So if it's not Sweet Caroline... It's Frank Sinatra, it would seem. And he quoted saying the best is yet to come. And he said he would keep doing it his way. There we go. Some dad jokes there for you. I've always said Ed Davey is like fun dad. He's centrist fun dad, and he delivered when it came to his jokes, it would seem. It's a warm-up joke, so of course, you know, it's going to come across probably a little bit cringe, a bit stilted, but I got a chuckle from it. I should say I was in a conference. I watched it. I've actually got a little bit of a cold and a little bit of a fever. So I decided to, in my unusual way of home remedy, I would just watch the LibDem Conference with Ed Davey's speech. People take paracetamols. I apparently take my remedies through watching Ed Davey deliver a speech, but there we go. But anyway, moving on. He also talked about the country having no glass ceiling and discussed the threat from reform. And he actually evoked a little bit of Richard Nixon in his speech. I don't know if it was deliberate, because I have been debating when it comes to LibDem strategy. Now, for some LibDems, this is a concern. I personally don't think it's a concern because I have a very political diverse family. My uncle is a conservative, used to be a conservative. He's a kind of one nation liberal Tory, but there have been concerns from some LibDems that we are trying to pitch ourselves towards the Conservatives, which for a lot of social liberals, they think that's not the right tactic because, understandably, Labour is the party in government at the moment. So really, you should go after them. And also, we traditionally have more in common with the Labour Party. I've just realised I've got my my Bluetooth headset here, so apologise. I'm not going to go back. I said this was going to be really on the knee and really rough and ready, and I didn't prepare myself for that, so I'm not going back. But anyway, so he evoked a little bit of Richard Nixon. You know, who would have thought Richard Nixon would make an appearance in a LibDem conference? But he said that the LibDem stands by for Britain's decent and silent majority. Now, I want to say, where have you heard that before? But I've already spoiled it for you. But that was something Richard Nixon said. And a lot of people say that him using the phrase the silent majority really played into the hands of sort of small c conservative voters, you know, because you have to remember back in the 60s. A little, quite similar to today, actually. There was a lot of protests, tensions regarding multiculturalism, regarding race in America. And I find that a really interesting parallel. I don't know if it was deliberate on Ed's part. I don't think Ed was trying to evoke Richard Nixon, because let's be honest, I think even most conservatives wouldn't want to try and emulate Richard Nixon. But that was a very interesting observation. And for me, it kind of cements my view that I think the Lib Dems are trying to make inroads in trying to present themselves as kind of like more liberal, presentable, and sort of sensible conservatives. So that's interesting. I'll have to wait and see to see what happens, because there's been a lot of complaints in some LibDem circles that we're trying to so Liz Smart already announced a conference that she wanted to stop spending money on hotels for asylum seekers. Now, my immediate reaction was, oh my God, this sounds really, really awful. But actually, if you read into the policy details, she basically wants to speed up the asylum process and to sort of help free up the backlog, because the backlog is basically the reason why we are accommodating so many asylum seekers in hotels. They are costly, they are expensive. And let's be honest, they're just not very, right now, they don't feel like very secure places. And they're not particularly, you're stuck in one room. But yeah, but Ed Davey saying, we stand for Britain's decent and silent majority, it kind of invokes that kind of small c conservative sensibilities, at least in tone and in language. I think in detail, I think it'll be unfair to sort of paint Ed Davey as this kind of, Nixon-like. I mean, Nixon, by today's standards, would be considered a liberal conservative over in America. But I think that's really interesting, especially since it complements the theatrics that was the whole when they were reclaiming the flags. So at party conference, they were trying to reclaim the flags, and Tim Farron gave a speech about that. But I just thought that was an interesting observation. He then goes on to say he's going to target his target is to get more seats from the Conservatives. Again, a very interesting observation there. That's not to say he didn't go after Labour. He did go after Labour, but I find that really fascinating that he went for the Conservatives. And in the speech, he actually went after the Conservatives and said how hypocritical the Conservatives are. He compared the Conservatives, going after Labour, saying, he compared them to being like a bull in the bull in the china shop, looking around the china shop and going, "Oh, look at all this mess! Look at this mess! How dare they? How dare they? How dare all this mess and broken china is on the floor?" Which is true. It is really true. I don't think the Conservative Party should have any validation or any kind of should command any respect, really, when it comes to it's a bit like it's like the old saying goes, throwing stones in glass houses, and I think it's a very it's clever to remind people of that. Now, if I wanted to offer some constructive criticism here, I think the Conservative Party are really old news. I think it's good to remind people, and if you are one of those kind of liberal conservatives, One Nation Tories who might feel a little bit politically homeless at the moment and are flirting with going for the Conservatives, it might be a good strategy for the Lib Dems to try and hoover up those voters, because logistically the Lib Dems do very well in these very like suburban country conservative marginals, and think it would be a bit unwise to completely ignore the Conservatives. I think it is good to remind the public how bad the Conservatives left our country. But, I think they need to be a little bit careful, because I think it is going to be very old news very quickly. And I think, we've now got we have got new players. We've got Reform on the right, and we even have the Greens on the left, depending where you sit in our Liberal Democrat family tree, you have to sort of there are new players on the block now. So I think Ed probably needs to, it's good it's good that they are reminding the public about the Conservatives' shameful legacy. They left our country, but perhaps they need to also be a bit mindful of they also might have to be a bit mindful about not forgetting that there are other players. Now, that isn't to say that reform wasn't ignored. In fact, reform and Nigel Farage pretty much eclipsed Ed Davey's, and so much to Nigel Farage's humour, I would say. He did a tweet saying, Ed Davey talks about me so much, he's obsessed. I think he needs a psychiatrist. I'll pay for that psychiatrist. The Reform UK really did eclipse Ed Davey's message. He was arguing that it's a choice between the Lib Dems and Reform, and he focused on how Nigel Farage wants to try and make Britain into like a mini Trump America. In fact, he kept saying, I don't want Farage's Britain. I don't want a Britain where the NHS is dismantled. I don't want a Farage Britain where we completely destroy environmental protection and roll back any actions on climate change. I don't want a Britain. Controversially, he mentioned gun laws and saying, comparing America gun laws and saying that's what Nigel Farage wants. Now, I actually don't know Nigel Farage's own position on gun laws, and Reform actually sent a press release defending that. It's interesting because they went after Ed Davey about gun law protection, but they didn't mention the NHS. Now, Nigel Farage and Reform have kept saying, the NHS is safe, it's safe under our hands. We have got no plans to privatise it. We've got no plans to have a European social insurance model and stuff like that. But they didn't defend that. They didn't defend that at all. They went after the guns, which I can understand. I think it's quite I don't know. It's quite a charged statement, really. I would maybe Ed Davey knows something I don't know. Maybe maybe the LibDem's know something I don't know. Maybe they found old posts or old tweets where Farage has advocated for, in weakening our UK gun laws. I don't know what Reform's position is on gun laws. I don't know. So a little bit risky. I agree on going after Reform on the NHS. I agree going after Reform on environmental protections and on climate change and stuff like that. I do agree on that. But yeah, the gun one was it was a bit of a shocker, not gonna lie. But Reform UK completely eclipsed the whole speech and the conversation. There was a focus group that was done where they presented different party strategies in attacking Reform, and they realised that the more you draw attention on Reform's sort of more dangerous plans, policies, except for immigration. For some reason, if you go after Reform on immigration, for some reason, it actually gives them more attention and people tend to be a little bit more drawn towards Reform. What actually works is targeting Reform's other policies, such as the National Health Service, environmental protection and climate change, and going after lesbian, gay, and bisexual rights. Trans, it's a bit of an iffy one. Sadly, I think public mood has changed on trans rights. It's sad that it has rolled back a little bit in the UK, but in terms of lesbian, gay, and bisexual rights, like gay marriage, because Nigel Farage has been known, he's said recently that he thought it was a mistake to liberalise gay marriage. The more you mention that, and also Nigel Farage himself, because there are some Reform members and even some Reform voters who are not particularly enthused by Nigel Farage. There are some Reform voters who would rather have Ben Habib running the show, or would rather have the MP they recently deselected. I forgot his name now. I apologise. Again, if I decide to edit this, I'll display his picture and name on the screen. So Ben Habib, that MP, and even quite controversially, Tommy Robinson. There are some people that would rather have them as the face of reform, or as the leaders of Reform UK than Nigel Farage, even amongst his own support base and his own members. And this has been supported by many focus groups and many respected opinion polls, such as More in Common, YouGov. Enough research has been shown on that. So I do think it's good that, much like as reminding voters about the Tories and their shameful legacy and the mess that they left the UK in, I think it is good to also remind people about Reform UK's agenda and to go after Nigel Farage, because again, Nigel Farage is quite close with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is not particularly liked in the UK. He is very unpopular in the UK. Even Conservatives don't like him. Conservatives, I think nearly 2/3 of them did not agree with having the state visit here in the UK for Donald Trump. And I think there was a plurality of Reform UK voters that also were not happy. This was from YouGov, by the way. Again, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to do it off memory, but I will. Again, if I decide to edit, I will display a screenshot here. But there are enough people that don't like Donald Trump, and Nigel Farage is very pally with Donald Trump. So I think it was good to try and link Farage and Reform UK in that conversation. Now, I'm going to be honest here. This is a conference speech to the party faithful, to the party flock. It's not a press release. It's not, hopefully it will get some media attention. I notice now, sadly, I think his speech will be eclipsed with Donald Trump's. Speaking of Donald Trump, I think his speech will be eclipsed with Donald Trump's speech over at the UN today. But I did notice that on BBC, I don't have a TV license, so I don't watch live television. So I can't actually speak for the news outlets, the television news outlets. But I did notice that on the BBC News website and on some and other news outlets, streaming outlets, there it was being reported. It was like second item. I'll accept that. I'm going to accept that the issue with Israel and Gaza is a more pressing matter, international affairs. So I completely understand. It's just dumb luck. Sadly, it's just really dumb luck. There's nothing that Ed could have done. No one was going to foresee this happening. This is what it is, guys. It is what it is. I hate saying that saying, but sometimes it's valid. So it was good. I think it was enough to keep the party faithful happy, and to sort of give a warning to the British electorate about, do we really want to have the divisive nature of politics that's currently rippling through America? So yeah, I also quite liked that he mentioned affectionately that we are woke liberal Britain. I thought, because Ed Davey, he's now I have a few issues with Ed Davey. I do have a few issues. I think sometimes our policy direction and our goals and agenda, and in terms of policy detail, and I guess really the sort of the philosophy of our party can come across as very milquetoast, a bit fluffy, a bit directionless, and I do have a bit of complaints with that. But I thought it was really quite bold and good that he said that Britain, very affectionately, is woke liberal Britain. Now, saying the word woke wouldn't normally get favours, but I think Ed's recognising an electorate there who think, actually, I don't mind being called woke. I want to reclaim woke, in the same way that I think Tim Farron, now with passage of time, I was a bit unsure to start with, but I think with passage of time, quite brilliantly tried to reclaim the flags to both be a symbol of pride, but not pride for the fascists or for the nationalists. It's about patriotism and about loving our country. I think it's good that he's also saying we are woke. The LibDem's are a woke party, and we don't mind being called woke, and we think Britain is a woke liberal Britain in some ways. So yeah, I thought now Ed Davey is not a orator by any means. It was very plain speaking. It was very kind of just very kind of, plain speaking. I wouldn't say he's not an orator. He hasn't got the gift of oratory or or clever word lines or sound bites that you would hear from people like Thatcher or Blair or even people like Charles Kennedy. I think Charles Kennedy, although Charles Kennedy was also very plain speaking, and I think there's an appeal there. I think Charles Kennedy did have some level of oratory and at least wit. He had a lot of wit and was very good at making kind of analogies and comparisons. He was very good at that. But in terms of the speech, it was pretty good. It was decent. He kind of reminded people about now. I take issue with some LibDems because there are some LibDems in our party who say, "Oh, we aren't talking up enough about policy." I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Where I will agree on that is that I think we should be bolder. I think we should be bolder. And I also think, like Labour, we have a communications issues. We have a communication issue because having worked for a local, I'm no longer a digital officer for my local branch, but I did used to get the sort of press summaries and briefs and debriefs about what we're going to talk about for our social media releases. And there is a lot of policy. So in policy terms, there was nothing new in terms of policy. I like that he personalized it. So he talked about cancer and he said he spoke to this guy and just, it felt like very human. I like the human side to Ed Davey. I love that he just does seem like a decent, humble, nice guy. And I like that he personalized a policy platform regarding cancer care by connecting it to a guy's own failings of the NHS at the moment. So in terms of policy on that, he talked about he wants to improve cancer care. He wants to replace old analog and dated cancer screening equipment by law. He talked about the need of providing free meals for all school children. He talked about that in the speech as well. And he also talked about he also talked about social care. He also talked about social care, which it's a bit of a fixture now, and I like that we are becoming the party of social care because I think social care links so much to the National Health Service. So I agree. I think it might run the risk of seeming like that's our only policy, which it's an important policy. And I think every party needs to have a big ticket item policy. So I think it is good, but I think we are running the risk of just being the social care party. I think we need to really expand on that. But it does connect with the NHS. If you improve social care, you help with the backlog and stuff like that. He talked about carers as well. Again, back with care. He talked about wanting to help carers. Now, he did cause a little bit of controversy with yesterday when he said some remarks of people of fraud in the people committing fraud on disability benefits. Now, yes, there is fraud, but it's less than 1%. From my most recent knowledge of reading studies on this, it's less than 1%. I think there are more issues on tax fraud than there is on welfare and benefit fraud. But however, he did say we should increase financial support, both support, but also financial payments for people who have disabilities, who are on receipts of PIP and ESA, and also talked about expanding it for carers. So I think that got really lost in that conversation, and the media will always want to clip the bad bit because it's going to get the news, it's going to create a little bit of drama. He said that was yesterday, but today he talked about how helping carers more, and that carers are basically unsung heroes. And I think there are policies to do with school. Interestingly enough, not a lot of policies to do, like there were mentions of the economy. He mentioned about how Labour have screwed it up, their national insurance tax rise, their the farmers tax and stuff like that, but not a lot about the budget deficit. Not actually a lot was mentioned about that, which I was a little bit surprised. Considering how pressing that issue is and how that is that's becoming national conversation. So a little bit surprised, maybe because they haven't ironed out any details yet. Like I said, we are only 1 year in from Labour taking office, so I don't expect him to have fully ironed out details on policy. But there were policies that got the party faithful going and rally behind, and it was all good. And yeah, he went after Musk. He went after Elon Musk as well, saying how these social media companies are taking a stranglehold and trying to make our country so divisive and ruining people's mental health. He mentioned mental health as well, and he linked mental health in terms of the LibDem values and wanting to tackle mental health issues. He also went after the media, and he was not afraid to go after the BBC and saying that the BBC are giving Reform UK so much press coverage, so much media time, and such softball questionings and not giving them real scrutiny. So again, that got a large applause from the party faithful, from the party members, which is valid. I think it is valid, but I still, again, being a digital media officer, I do think the Lib Dems need to just, because like today, in fact, I'm just going to do a quick check on it. Let me just do a quick check on let me just load up another. Can I get Chrome? Yes, let's get Chrome up. I'm just going to do a quick check on BBC News right now. BBC News. So yeah, it's still second billing on BBC News website. Again, I don't blame the BBC taking Trump's speech as being of higher importance, because it is a very important issue at the moment. But let's just look at most read. So most read. So it looks like in terms of the most read articles, it's the 8th most read article, and I'm just looking for Trump. Well, Trump, the one to do with the UN, appears to not be there. In fact, it's something else. Apparently, he said London wants to go to Sharia law. Okay, it is still live, so that's probably why it's not Ed. But Ed Davey Ed Davey is 8th on the most read news website pages. So yeah, so you could call that a win. I suppose you could call that a win, but I think we'll see what happens. I don't expect the traditional press, like the newspapers, to give us much airing when it comes to this. And to be honest, like I said, it was not, Ed Davey. It's both his benefit and his weakness that it's not he's not an orator. He's not the most colourful person. He's very plain speaking, which there's an appeal there. And he did go on the attack. He called Farage a liar. He said he should apologise. It got quite aggressive at times. I was surprised how punchy Ed Davey's speech was. And yeah, he didn't hold back. And I like that he was trying to reclaim the narrative. I think actually, yeah, I take it back actually. Like, I think overall, it might not sound so colourful, but there was definitely litters in the speech where he actually got really punchy, and he was punching really above his weight and really kind of sharpened the knife to go after Farage. So actually, I think there was elements of that. Now, there was nothing exciting in terms of policy, new policies, or anything like that. It's a little bit light and fluffy, but again, I don't expect much for a political party in which we've only just had over one full year of a Labour government. So yeah, that's basically my full assessment of the speech. It was pretty decent. It was pretty good. I do hope the media will do justice and actually pick up the speech. Like I said, it appears to be the second item on the BBC News when you click on their homepage. And it looks like on the most read articles, he has beaten Donald Trump. So again, we can call that a win. I'm curious to see what the ones above him are. I'm always interested to find some kind of cat-related story, but no cat-related stories. But cats are always going to win, aren't they? But anyway, so yeah, that's it, guys. That's kind of my full assessment of the speech. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, it's very on the nose. It's very kind of rough and ready. So yeah, but I don't know if I'll do these often because I've been kind of a bit everywhere with my content at the moment. I think it's because I've really been struggling to get my debate panel to agree date on the Jeremy Corbyn debate. I really do want that debate to happen soon because I'm getting a little bit impatient, but that's because I'm just super excited. But yeah, so my next video will be to do with my tier rankings of UK post-war UK prime ministers, and if not that, then probably the Jeremy Corbyn debate. We'll see what comes first. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and if you enjoy my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, see you later and goodbye.